This is January 20th, 2005. We are interviewing John Jones of Rexford, New York, at the Watervliet Arsenal at noon. He served in the United States Army from March 1, 1949 to April 22, 1990. This interview is being conducted by Kenneth and June Hunter. Please tell us your full name and when and where you were born.
My full name is John S. Jones. I was born in Cambridge, New York on 23rd of April, 1930.
And what did you do before you entered the military?
I was involved with the General Electric Company, the Office of General Services.
And did you enlist or were you drafted?
I enlisted.
And where did you go after you enlisted? Where were you assigned?
I was assigned to a National Guard unit in Schenectady, New York, at the 2nd Battalion Headquarters Company of the 2nd Battalion, 105th Infantry, 27th Infantry Division.
And what were the circumstances that made you willing to enlist?
Well, there was a guy by the name of Rowe, Leonard C. Rowe, who was a member of that organization, and he asked me to join. I had no problem. I had registered for the draft, and I probably would have been drafted a little bit later anyway. So he talked me into joining that organization, and I did. And I'm not sorry I did either, but that's how I initially got involved with it. And let me continue on. And I joined this unit as a recruit grade E1 at that time. And back in those days, the recruit grading was not the same as it is today, where you go away for 10 weeks or whatever it might be. It was done at the home station. And what they did was they assigned you to a particular unit within that unit. And I happened to be assigned to the intelligence section of the headquarters of the 2nd Battalion. And I didn't spend too much time with that in the beginning. What I did is spent more time with doing close order drill and how to take a weapon apart, military hygiene, map reading, and things of that nature during the 48 drills we had the first year. Then when we went to AT, which was at Fort Drum, that the whole division took the newer recruits and they gave them extra training in map reading and weapons firing and things of that nature. While we were at Drum, it was kind of a difficult situation because the battalion itself had one 1.5 ton truck, two 3/4 ton trucks, and two 1/4 ton Jeeps, because it was kind of difficult. Just after the war, it was kind of difficult to get a lot of equipment. And we had about, in the headquarters company, there was about 30 people, which usually is about 160 people, and they only had 30 people in that organization. And it made it quite difficult. So we went to Fort Drum in those days via railroad, and we take the trucks that we had, and they bring all the equipment they had there, and we loaded it on a train and brought it up to Fort Drum, and drove the vehicles up there, and came back, and when they arrived at Drum, went and picked the stuff up and shoveled it off. And that was an all-day and an all-night project to do that with 30 people. Plus you had mess halls to put together, and set up supply rooms, and set up barracks with the bunks, and make the bunks, and set up your clothes and all the rest of the stuff. But it was you were tired at the end of the day, and sometimes you didn't go to bed till 2 o'clock in the morning or 3 o'clock in the morning, and get up at 5:45 again and go all day again. And there was always the retreat parades. We had reveilles, formations, and we had retreat parades, every night, retreat parades, watch the flag come down. And let's see, one of the things, that's going back 56 years, I think, or something like that. What else did we do?
What was the weather like up there at Fort Drum?
Well,
were you there in the winter, or?
We were there usually, it all depends. In some cases, you were up there earlier when you went in May, and sometimes in May up there you might have snow on the ground. And if you went in September, might have snow on the ground at that time, but not too often. But usually it was July or August, maybe the end of June. And the weather was always fairly warm and sometimes hot up there. And sometimes it was wet. And when it was wet, you still went out in the wet and you set up pup tents and all this other stuff. It was 2 weeks of training, let's put it that way. And that's the 2 weeks you had allocated for that kind of training. I was, like I said, assigned to the S2 section of the battalion. And in that period of time, they used to run CPXs and a CPX, a command post exercise. And they were done on a division level, and they were done at the Syracuse State Fairgrounds. And we go for a Friday, Saturday, and a Sunday, come back Sunday, and they run the Army will run a canned CPX. And of course, being a member of the S2 section, that we got some training in how to prepare the forms and all this other intelligence maps and all this other stuff, and how to work with the S3 section rather. And it was quite interesting. And the Army would give you canned problems. And they would give it at the division level, and the division would write an operations order. It would go down to the regiments, and the regiments would write their part of the order, and we'd go down to the battalions, and the battalion would write their order and send it down to companies, and the company would make a frag order on what their part in the session was. And that usually was in the winter time, and sometimes in the winter that was kind of a tough haul to go to Syracuse along that thruway. But we did it, and it was we had a lot of training in it. In I think it was 51 or 52, we were on the agenda to be called to go to Korea. And we didn't have to go after all, but we were called on that. So we prepared a lot of things for mobilization, everything except for physicals. Well, we did what we were supposed to do by our mobilization plans, and our mobilization station at that time was Fort Devens, Massachusetts. And a lot of the officers went over there to look at the site and to see what buildings and so forth they were supposed to get. And for the enlisted people, at that time I was probably a buck sergeant, and we went down to Camp Smith, Peekskill, many a weekend, and we had training down there to include firing machine guns, rifles, whatever you have. And it was a very educational type of thing as far as the military went. I went from there in 1955. The Army made a change in the structure of the military divisions. They called it the ROCAD and the ROCID. ROCID was a reorganization of current infantry division, and ROCAD was the reorganization of the current armored division. And at that time, the 27th Infantry Division was changed to the 27th Armored Division. And the regiments were changed to combat commands. And I was a member of the 1st Battalion Mechanized of the 105th Infantry, and that was attached to Combat Command A. And that was involved, I was involved at that time as a reconnaissance a sergeant in a reconnaissance platoon. I got to be the platoon sergeant of that platoon. And I can remember one time we had an M41 tank that nobody knew anything about, but we found out about and how to run that thing. And we had quite a bit of work that we did during the AT period and during the 48 drills we had. But going back a little bit, I went from the S2 section when it was an infantry battalion, the 27th Infantry. I went to the P&A platoon, Pioneer and Ammunition platoon. And that had to do with small engineering projects for the battalion and moving ammunition, especially mortar ammunition and probably machine gun and stuff like that, into where the rifle companies were, to make sure that the rifle companies had sufficient amount of mortar and 30 caliber ammunition, whether it be for machine guns or rifles. Now, getting back to the 105th, the 1st Battalion, 105th Infantry, 27th Armored Division, that was one that we did a lot of work on a division level at AT. We ran FTXs, field training exercises. And I happened to be a maintenance officer at that time, but I'm getting a little bit ahead of myself. When I was about to leave the unit in 1957, but I signed up for one more year, and I had 8 years to my required duty there. So I did the 8 years, and I said, well, I'll sign up for another year. And in that year, I worked in the S3 shop. I was the S3 sergeant of the operations sergeant for that battalion. And I was asked by the S3, who was Major Robert Case, if I'd like to go to the OCS program. So I said, well, I don't know. I was about ready to get out. And I said, well, let me think about it. So I thought about it a little bit. And the colonel, who was Colonel McCord at that time, was the battalion commander. And he wanted me to go to that thing, too. So I said, okay. And it was at Fort Benning, Georgia, in February of 1958. I had to have the Congress of the United States accept me, write I forget what the term was right now, but they had to okay me on that thing because I was going to be over 28 when I graduated from that. And I was 29 in April, and I graduated 2 or 3 days before that. But I went down there, and a lot of the officers there kind of clued me in. He says, "Don't fight the problem." He said, "Go down there and do what they tell you. If they tell you to line up some books, line up some books. If they tell you to run, run. Whatever they tell you to do, do." And so I went down there with that mental attitude, and there was 182 people that were in that class, and there's 82 that graduated. They flunked out 100 people in that class. I think I was somewhere around 25 or 26 in that class, and I was one of the older ones in that class too. And when you're running with 17 and 18-year-old kids, even at 28, it's a little bit difficult. But I enjoyed it, but I don't think I'd like to do it again. But it was great training in self-discipline, how to take orders. And one of the things that Captain Greenberg, who was the company commander of that 54th Company, which I was in, the school brigade, he told us in the beginning, he says, you know, if you want to give orders, you got to be able to take them. And we're going to see who can take them and who can't take them. And there's a few people that couldn't take them. They broke and they were sent home. And there was a couple of guys that went there, were sent home 2 days before the school ended. And they went through the whole thing and they still flunked out on it. Well, it was a very difficult, but I think a very rewarding program, and I'm glad that I took it. But I don't think I want to take it again. But I went from there. I got assigned to Company B of the 1st Battalion Mechanized 105th Infantry as a platoon leader. So that's where I broke my got broken in as that, and I got several assignments. And I got transferred from there to be the support platoon leader in the headquarters. And the support platoon basically was to take care of all the needs that the S4 had. In other words, to make ration breakdown, go pick up the stuff, bring it back, make the ration breakdown, and the 6 or 5, I should say, 6 is classes of supply is to take them and distribute them in accordance to what the requisitions were. So that was one of the jobs we had with that, and ration breakdown, of course. And I got transferred from there to the 4.2 mortar platoon in the headquarters. 4.2 mortar was equivalent to the 105 millimeter howitzer in an artillery battalion. It was used extensively in World War II for smoke and tear gas and things like that they used to fire. It was in the cannon company of the Infantry Regiment. In the Korean War, they used that thing for explosive projectile, regular ordnance in it, and they used it, of course, for smoke and other things too. And it was quite an interesting thing, you know. I was in the Guard at that time when I was the platoon leader there, and I had to figure out how to use that thing indoors in the wintertime. Outdoors, we could set it up and we could run, you know, programs with it. I had some canned programs for feeding it to forward observers, and they'd bring it back through communications to not the gunners, but the Fire Direction Center, and we plot them on either two ways, either by graphs or by coordinates on maps, and we plot this thing, and then we give the fire commands, and the guys would know what kind of increments to put on the mortar round when they put it down the thing, down the tube. And I said, how can we figure that out? So how we figured it out was I found a catalog from Fort Benning, Georgia, and in that catalog it had an instrument there that would fit down the tube of the mortar. And what we did with it was we created a little moulage or whatever you want to call it, made of plywood. And we knew how far that this round would go. There was a round, and it had a 22 caliber blank in the bottom of it. And what we did with it is we did all the plotting and stuff on that, and had the Fire Direction Center set up the firing order, and it was all canned stuff. And everybody in there got an opportunity to be a part of the mission. And we used to fire that in the wintertime, and it worked out quite well. I was transferred from there. I started my long tenure as a company commander. I went to Charlie Company. I became the commander of Charlie Company, and because of work reasons, I had to leave there after about 3 or 4 months. And I went to AT with those guys, but I got assigned to do a, oh wait a minute, I won't go along with that. That's wrong. I was out of there for about, let's say, about 10 or 12 months. And because of work reasons, I didn't get assigned anywhere else on that. I just went in the inactive National Guard. And I returned as a liaison officer, battalion headquarters. And I was in that for about 2 or 3 months. And then I went on to become the company commander of A Company. And that was up in Gloversville. And as a company commander of A Company, we had a lot of training to do in marksmanship training and in tactical training. And we did some of it because they got a place up there, a field up there where we could go out and do various tactical exercises. It was big enough that we could run fire teams together in squad actions mainly. And we went out and did things like that. When at AT, we participated in a lot of ranges. I ran a lot of combat ranges and a lot of KD ranges too, both. For KD ranges for rifles and KD ranges for machine guns, and combat ranges for targets would come up and so forth. I ran several of those things over the period of time I was with that unit. And I ran it for the battalion. I just didn't run it for the unit. Then I got transferred from there to be the maintenance officer of battalion headquarters. And being a maintenance officer, the new system, the TAM system, came into vogue. The Army Maintenance Management System. And it's a series of forms that had to be kept up to date by operators, by mechanics in the field of, there's different echelons of maintenance. And we were first and second echelon down at the battalion level. Company then battalion was first, second echelon maintenance. We had to keep score on a lot of that stuff and make sure that the trucks and so forth were all set. I used to go and make investigations of and check out vehicles in the various companies. They were around the state and take care of those. And at AT, we used to set up checkpoints, and we worked as an operation, not separate companies, but separate companies were within the battalion motor pool, and we worked that as a one unit structure at that time. It worked out very good. Then I got transferred to be the headquarters company commander, really headquarters. And that consists of mainly all your troops are in maintenance, or they're in supply, or they're in something to do with the staff or communications and things of that nature. So when you get up in the morning and you have your reveille formation, all the rest of the time you don't see your people unless you go around and see them. And you still have to take care of their see they get fed. You got to know where they are. If they're out in the field somewhere, you got to be able to know how many people are out there and send the food out for them. If they're in the cantonment area, they can come in and they can eat at the mess hall. And you always kept your mess hall in pretty good shape. I spent a lot of time with mess halls. And of course, I had to set up officers' mess too. We used to call it Malmac and Daffodils because that's what the guys bought. Just these plates and so forth that they bought that weren't unbreakable. They were some kind of plastic. I forget what they were, but they were unbreakable. And they had little daffodils on them. But we ran an officer's mess in that thing. But I'm just making a side on that. When I ate when I was a line company commander, I always ate in the field last, and all my officers ate last. In a cantonment area, we had a little side table there that we used strictly for the officers, and the senior NCOs, I had one set up for them. I also remember one thing about the Army had a program back in the probably around 59 or 60, where they were losing a lot of money on people throwing away rations into the garbage can. So we were admonished to prevent this if we could. So, okay, what am I gonna do about that? So what I did is I waited outside the mess hall, and I looked at some of the guys that were coming out. I'd see, you know, if it was junk on there, I didn't care. But if it was eggs hadn't been eaten or whatever it is, I said, well, come here. And at that time, the coffee was in a regular canteen cup. So I'd fill a canteen cup up with about half a cup of coffee, and I'd take the residue from what was on this guy's plate. It hadn't been eaten, and he didn't eat hardly any of it, and it might have been drunk the night before, I don't know. And I'd dump it in there, and mix it up, and send him in there to eat it. And the guys saw that. Didn't have any trouble with eating after that. Didn't have any trouble. The guy was sicker than a dog, but that's all right. Didn't have any trouble with it. Yeah, I said, tell them in the mess hall, I don't care how much you take, eat it. I mean, I don't care a few scraps here and there, but you put it on your plate, you eat it. If you don't want that much, don't take that much. And I had the mess hall, when I saw there was a lot of that stuff, I say, you cut your rations down by 20 people. You still got enough stuff. And we saved money on it that way. But then I got an off assignment. I was the S4 at the time. I got transferred from there, from being a headquarters company commander, and I got transferred to being a maintenance officer again. And I did that for another year or two. Then I got transferred to be the S4 of the battalion. And I went down to Fort Knox for a preventive maintenance course down there. And it was only a week, but it was a very good preventive maintenance course. I got a lot of information from that. And I came back, and the next thing I know, that I got another assignment. And I was for, I don't know how many months it was. It probably was about 8 or 9 months anyway. I had to go down to the Civil Defense Office in the city of Schenectady, or the county of Schenectady. And a guy by the name of Stanley Rzuski, who I knew him, and I had done the mobilization plan for the battalion. I had written that all completely out when I was the S4. And they sent me down here for 8 months to help them with a mobilization plan for the county. I went down there and saw Stanley. I knew Stanley because he lived just down a block from me. And I said, Stanley sent me down here because they want me to help you with your mobilization plan. He says, what's that? And I says, you got to mobilize this county. How are you going to mobilize this county? I said, well, you don't have no plan for that. Well, I sat down for 8 months and told him what he's got to do. You know, like you gotta get a hold of contractors in the county. You got something in floods or something like that, you need contractors to sandbag, or you need contractors to build. You got a big fire, you need contractors to do that. You need laundry service if you got people that are out of their house and they don't have any clothes, but the clothes you give them, they can't wear them for 6 months. You got to have laundry service. You got to have a place they're going to eat. If you can't do anything else, you got to have tent cities. Where are you going to put up the tents? You know, all this kind of stuff. So we finally derived a plan. I just gave them the information. I said, you got to find these guys. I can't really find these people. And so I went, I did that for 8 months, and what they done with the plan after that, I have no idea, but they got at least an idea how to run that thing anyway.
One thing that people may not realize, that when you were in the Guard, you take an oath of allegiance to both the governor as well as the president.
As the president,
and that was an idea of what you did when you, for the governor,
yep.
On the duties preparing the local officials.
Yep, yep. That was one thing. And while I was doing that, I took a correspondence course in civil defense. They had one available. I said, well, I'll take it. And I took it. And there was a lot of information in there too about how the civil defense ought to operate. And they did know about dosimeters and all that other stuff, what they use to test for nuclear stuff or things like that. But they weren't completely ignorant of the whole thing. What they were ignorant of is how to mobilize a county. And boy, if today they need to know how to do it. If with this terrorism that they got, they better know how to do that. Well, up comes Mr. McNamara. He was the Secretary of Defense in the early '60s. And what happened to him? Well, he started to change the outlook of the reserve, and you no longer saw as many infantry units, artillery units, armored units, and stuff like that. He took the 27th Armored Division and he divided it in many, many pieces. And I thought, well, maybe they're going to throw me up in some balcony somewhere and forget about me. But they didn't do that. I got from the headquarters of the New York Army National Guard, I got the order to transform the headquarters company of the 1st Battalion, mechanized 105th Infantry, to 105th Military Police Company. And, you know, you got to take a look at the 201 files, you got to look at the T&E of it, and the structure of it, and you got to change weapons, you got to change vehicles, you got to do all this. I spent a year doing that. And it was a very difficult year because when somebody else, I couldn't get somebody to get in a truck to bring stuff down and exchange it somewhere. So I got in a truck and I drove it down there myself and exchanged it and brought it back. And wouldn't get home at 2 or 3 o'clock in the morning. And I get up and I go to work the next day. I did that a lot. So I got transferred, I spent a year in that. And that was the year that they had a lot of problems with riots and stuff throughout the country. So one of the things that we did at that time was go to the Gildan Rifle Range, and we practiced, what's the term I'm looking for, practiced how to deal with mobs and so forth. Control. At the Voorheesville Army Depot where they had the streets. So we practiced that stuff out there. And I got caught one time, not caught, I got an assignment. And the assignment was, even though I was a company commander, what I had to do was to feed 1,000 people. You know, how am I going to feed 1,000 people? First of all, you got to requisition enough chow first. You take it off of the master menu sheet, which they had at that time. But I didn't order for 1,000 people. I ordered for 900 people. And I had to fuel trucks and do all this stuff. So how am I going to feed 1,000 people? So I had to go and get company mess sergeants. And I made one guy in charge of the whole mess. And what we did is we set it up at the Gildan Rifle Range. And we borrowed the stoves from different companies and set up, I think we had about 10 or 12 stoves there. And we had a whole bunch of tables and everything we could feed guys off of. And they had a mess hall up there at the Gildan Rifle Range. So we did that, and we fed them in echelons. We'd have guys out training at Voorheesville. Okay, you bring them back in by such and such a time, we'd feed them. Send them back out, get another group, bring them in, and so we didn't have all 1,000 at one time. Yeah, we did that, and it worked out pretty good. We did for a couple of years. We did it also at field training up at Drum. During that year, a couple of years there, they had a lot of problems with those riots. And we went up to the back areas where the old concrete block buildings were up back in there. We used the streets there for using bayonets and all this stuff for riot sticks and all the rest of this stuff. But But that was an interesting ordeal, let's put it that way. And I got transferred from there to be the adjutant of the 102nd Military Police Battalion. And being the adjutant, I was involved with inspections, 201 files and all that stuff. And I was also in charge of parades and formations. And the Colonel Clayton, who was the commander of that particular battalion, he had a formation every time we went in there. So I used to put marks on the floor where everybody stood and all this stuff. I said, you stand there, you stand there, you stand there. And it worked okay. And I never had any problems with it. But after a while, I was running all over the state because they had units in Schenectady, they had units in Buffalo, and I think they had units in Utica, and they had one other one. I think it was Rochester. So I was working, and I was traveling a lot with the state. And so I asked for a transfer to go to another unit, and I didn't get one. So I said, well, because I'm running all over the state, and I'm running all over the state for these guys too, and it was just getting overpowering for me. And I wasn't getting any younger either. So I decided, okay, I found an opening as S4 for the 1st Brigade of the 98th Division training. So I applied for it. So I went in there for the interview, and when I heard the interview, I knew I was going to get it. That was already cut and dry. It was somebody else was going to get that job. So I went in for the interview, and I gave them the whole 9 yards. Yeah, I didn't get it, and I knew I wasn't going to get it, and there was 3 or 4 or 5 other people that applied for it, and there was one guy that got it, and I knew who it was. And I knew it before I went in there who it was going to be, which was all right. But I got a call about a week later from the Army advisor over there, and he said, I looked at your resume, and you had a lot to do with maintenance. I said, well, I know the TAMS program fairly well. And he said, well, we got a lot of problem with the maintenance program over at the 464th Engineer Battalion. So I went over there, and I talked to Colonel Crispin, and he said, well, you have some pretty good credentials on that thing. Would you like to be a member? I said, sure. So I went over there as a captain, I think I was at that time. So went in there, and it took us a year to straighten that thing out, but we straightened it out, the TAMS program and all the maintenance, how they were doing maintenance and things of that nature. And one day he came before AT to me. I happened to be the engineer equipment officer. That was the correct title, the MOS for that job I took over. And what I knew about engineer equipment, you get put on the head of a pin. And he says to me, you know, we're going to go to AT and whatever the dates were. And we're going to have to drive piles, wood piles. And that's going to be your job, drive wood piles. We're going to put up some timber trestle bridge, 1 or 2 timber trestle bridges, and you've got to drive some piles in there so we can support it. Okay, so I got a hold of a guy, Sergeant Ballou, who was the platoon sergeant of that particular platoon. I said, you know anything about setting up this pile driver? He says, I don't know anything about it. He says, we can get the books out. Yeah, we're going to set this thing up here so we know what it looks like and how to put it together, and we're going to get the rest of the people in here so they know how to. So we did that. We did it up in a motor pool, and we learned how to set that thing up. And we went to AT. And we didn't put any piles in the ground back at home station, but when we got up there, we put a couple of practice ones down. We made our own piles, and they had piles there too. And we knocked a couple in the ground, and we knew how it was supposed to be done. So we put the piles in, and they built the bridges around it. But you know, when you're an officer in the Army or you're an NCO in the Army, that you have to be adaptable and flexible, and you got to learn how to do these things. People aren't going to tell you how to do it and run it by hand. You got to figure out how to do it yourself. I was in there for, I don't know, maybe a year, probably a year. And I got assigned as the S2 of that battalion. And the S2 of that battalion was what? That was mainly in security clearances. What they mainly did was security clearances and make sure all the cryptographic stuff was checked every once in a while to say it was all there and all the rest of the stuff. And we didn't do too much training in the intelligence cycle and all this other stuff. But we did do a lot of work on seeing that people got updated on their security clearances. And I was in there probably a year and a half, something like that, and next thing I know, I'm the battalion executive officer of that battalion. And I took a look around and saw what was going on in the battalion. One of the big features that was going on in that battalion at that time was underages and overages. People weren't taking care of property. And so I let the commander know about it. And I let him know the terms that, look, you're going to get in trouble if you don't do something about it. And I found out later how much money's in that battalion, with $55 million worth of equipment in there, and that's a lot of money. And these people didn't know where half this stuff was. So I kept after him on it. I said, John, you got to find out where this equipment is, who owns it, who's responsible for it, and who signed it for it. Bing, 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 bing. Next thing I know, I'm fired. I'm fired because I opened my mouth too much. So, okay, I had a lot of friends on the staff of that, and they kept me appraised of what was going on in there. But in the meantime, and this was about 17 months, I was up in Fort Drum. I called a guy up there. I knew the guy that was the head of the engineering section up there. He was I think he was a major or captain. I can't remember now. But he got me a job up there, and I worked 8 weeks in the summer for 2 years. And what I did was take care of, he had a job there to renovate the hospitals, the old hospital down there, and they took the insides all apart and they put new heating systems in there, put new roofs on it, put new walls in there and floors, fixed up the floors and everything else. My job was to see, to coordinate with the reserve units that came in there and see that they got the materials on time and they did the work right. I happened to be involved with, hi Frank, I happened to be involved at that time with the state architect's office, so I knew quite a bit about the field of architecture. Okay, I worked on the hospital renovations for about 2 years. It was about 17 months altogether. And then I learned that they wanted to get rid of the battalion commander. So I talked to the commander of the 1209th U.S. Army Garrison, who was the next higher command in that echelon, and I said I'd like to have an interview for it. So I took an interview for it, and I got the command of the battalion. I won't go into, I had to take the flag from this other guy, but I don't want to go into that one too much. But when I took over the battalion, the first thing I did was have three different inventories taken. I took one, the 98th Division took one, and the Army took one. And we come down, we sat with a consensus of opinion on how much we had, and it turned out to be $55 million worth of equipment, and who was assigned who and what. And I got together with the guys and said, look, you lose it, you pay for it. You keep it, keep track of it. I had a warrant officer that was in my supply section at that time, and that's all he did was go around to units on the weekend drills that we had and check out various times. He'd take the property book and open it up and say, okay, it says 50 of these, I want to see 50 of them. And serial numbered items and things like that. Then I was there for, well, I enjoyed that battalion command there. And we did a lot of things. We built Fusa Boulevard up in Fort Drum. When I was the executive officer, one of the assignments I got was to go down to Raystown, which was in the lower part of Pennsylvania. We're stationed at Indiantown Gap, and we went down there and we blew a dam. With some new shape charges that the Army had out. And they gave us the assignment to go down there and blow this dam, and we flooded Raystown. It became a reservoir. And they built, I don't know how what else they did, but they flooded. We had to blow that dam, and they flooded. But in the meantime, not only did we do that, but we did river crossing operations down there in the river and stuff like that. And we did that up at Fort Drum a few years too. Then I got an assignment to go down to Fort Eustis. That's a transportation school down there. And we built some bridges across the tidal areas. So they couldn't cross that, it would be a little flooded. So we built them up and we built some bridges. And what we did is we went there 3 weeks. And what we did was we divided the battalion up. I went there for 3 weeks. And divided the battalion up to be half of it went a week and a half. Went the first 2 weeks. In the beginning of the second week, the second part come in and spent that week and the week after, and we got a lot of stuff done. I went from there to be the commander of the first. I said I think 324, but I think it's the 389th. The first of the 389th, 1st Battalion, 389th Regiment of the 98th Division training. And I was a commander there for about 9 months. And I made some changes in there because most of these guys are training in skill level 1 of their MOSs. And they should be in the skill level that they belong. So I took skill level 4 I think it was, now that I think of it, and had everybody training in at skill level 4, whatever their MOS was. So if they were 3 or 2, they got that along with the higher echelon. The reason I did that, because if they got mobilized, they may not go on a job of an instructor, and they may go on the job of whatever their skill level is. So they called up and they don't know what their skill level is. That's no good. So I did that I did some bivouacs and I did some other things. And after I left, they reverted back to skill level 1 again. Then I got transferred to being a director of MOS and enlisted courses at the 1157th USAR school. And in that, I ran all the MOS courses for the eastern half of New York State and the Sergeant Major's Academy. And in the summertime, I became the director of instruction for special MOSs. And I did it for 2 years. And the MOS was warehousing. So I went down to Indiantown Gap to do this training. And before I went down, I found out what they wanted to do. They had these books that you just read these books, and whenever you're done, you went nowhere. I said, no, that's not going to happen here. So I went with one of the guys, the full-time guys, to First Army, and I said, I need money. He says, I want to go to Tobiana Army Depot, and I want to have those folks teach these guys the rudiments of what warehousing is. I want to go the first week, okay. Yeah, we're going in the books, but nobody's leaving before 4 o'clock. So keep reading the books till 4 o'clock. You're going to have lunch, then you're going to go back and read the books some more. So we did that. I found I had to get somebody to run a mess hall. I had to find the barracks over there, and they had barracks. We had about 200 students. And I brought him over there, and I had talked to the guy before. It was civilian, was the operations sergeant or officer of Tobiana Army Depot. And he said, fine, we got a lot of civilians that do it. What happens when you get into when products come into a warehouse, how they're taken care of, the various equipment they have to move stuff around a warehouse, how they're processed out of a warehouse, how to find them in the warehouse, and things of that nature. So I went through that for 2 years, and people got something out of it. You know, they knew what a warehouse looked like, and at least they had an idea in their mind when they left what the process was about. They didn't know completely, but they knew what the process was about. It cost the First Army a few bucks, but they gave it to me anyway. And I got promoted full colonel in the school. And I didn't get offered any job in the 98th Division, so that was all right with me because I already had 34 years and I was getting tired anyway. So I went over to 1062nd RTU over here in Albany, and I spent time with their records, you know, helping them do reports and all the enlisted efficiency reports and the officers' efficiency reports. And I gave classes on logistics from company level up through division level over there. I'll give you a little background on my school. I'm a graduate of the Infantry Officers Career Course, graduate of the Military Police Officers Advanced Course. I'm a graduate of the Engineer Officers Advanced Course. I'm a graduate of the Command General Staff College. I'm a graduate of the Industrial College of the Armed Forces, the National Security Management course in that college. I'm a graduate of ALMAC, Army Logistics Management course, which is a senior level for logistics in the Army. And I'm a graduate of the, well, I told you about that maintenance course that I took. And I'm also a graduate of the senior engineer officers management course. And that there's a couple of others in there too, but just don't come to my head. But that's enough, I think, anyway. But I retired in 1990, and I had 41 years, 1 month, and 22 days of service in that thing. Never called up, but I'll say anybody who wears a uniform is eligible to be called, and they can come under harm's way at any time. And I appreciate people who want to participate, whether it be in reserve forces or on active duty or whatever it might be. I've got 2 major awards. That was the U.S. Army Meritorious Service Medal and the U.S. Army Commendation Medal. And I got several other reserve kind of medals, which I just don't have top of my mind what they're called right now. But it was an enjoyable and an educational time for me, and I'm not sorry that I did any of it. I was a senior architectural specifications writer with the state of New York, and that was a fairly good job. And I retired from that in 1995, and I didn't get married till I was 57 years old. My wife was 57. I had known her for 27 years before that. Long engagement. And poor girl passed away in 1999. She had cancer for 10 years. But that's, you can't help those things. Those things happen. And it's nobody's fault. And but I've had a pretty good life all my life. I've enjoyed what I've done, and I was always willing to serve wherever they wanted me to go, whatever they wanted me to do. And I'd still do that. In fact, I called when I was 61 years old, when they had Desert Storm going, I called down to Pentagon to see if they wanted some help down there. And he said, he looked me up on tears, and he said, "You're retired, aren't you?" I said, "Yeah, stay home." So at 75, I'm not going to ask anymore. Or I won't be 75 until April. But I don't think I'm going to ask it. I can't run as fast as I used to.
Well, thank you very much.
Well, you're quite
We've
welcome.
enjoyed hearing your story.
I don't know if it made much sense to you.